Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Donavan Starghill Show. Today we're going to be talking about Dr. Ethan Haim and his dismissal granted by the new DOJ. And also we'll be talking to you about what has happened on today's date, it being January 30th. We found out that a plane has crashed in the Potomac. And before that, we'll talk to you about the character or the actor that Sylvester Stallone is wanting to bring on to the Paramount series Tulsa King. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so legal and ethical perspectives on Dr. Ethan Haim. I have a couple of articles here, and what we could do for practice in terms of media analysis, we can look at these two articles. And what I'll do here, let me grab this one. So one is from the Free Press. All right, you can imagine maybe how that one leans. And then we also have an article here. This one is from the Texas Tribune. And so without knowing anything about, newspapers in Texas, not sure which way you're thinking I'm going to go with this, but let's just kind of look at the headlines here. One of them reads from the Texas Tribune: Feds drop charges against Texas doctor accused of leaking transgender care data. And then the Free Press reads: Ethan Haim, we took on the federal Leviathan and we won. Okay, it looks like a Leviathan is a mythical creature, kind of like this underwater dragon figure, so to speak. And so ultimately, I'll read you like a paragraph from because I wanted to break this down a couple of different ways. One is that they're saying the conservative activists are calling a win for anti-transgender activism. And I think that's a little bit far over the pale. Now, I mean, if you're one who considers to be a anti-transgender activist, that's perfectly fine. If you also consider yourself to be a parent who should be in the know and should, be given information to help their child make the best long-term decision, then I think that's a whole different thing than being an anti-transgender activist. We're coming into a time and a space where, the mixing of, hey, I just want to do the best thing for my child. I want to fully understand what's out there. And then also the back end of it, where you have doctors, they say the best patient is a sick child, because now you have a lifelong patient. And once you've infested one's mind and have them going down this path to changing their anatomy, you're going to be giving this person all sorts of treatments for the rest of their life. And I think that has been left out of the conversation in the overall concern for a child's well-being. And thank God for Dr. Ethan Haim, who understood that Governor Greg Abbott put a mandate out suggesting that in the state of Texas, we're no longer going to allow for surgeries on transgender youth. And that mandate was put forth. And unfortunately for Texas children, they were promoting that they were no longer doing these surgeries, but in fact were. And so you can see here some, again, the reporting, the discrepancies that were being reported is that it says, Haim, as a self-described whistleblower, was charged after he provided conservative activist Christopher Rufo with the records of children receiving gender transition related care at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, the largest pediatric hospital in the United States. And that's saying something, right? I mean, the largest pediatric hospital in the country is, on one hand, saying, no, we're not doing these surgeries. And then on the back end, you have someone who, and imagine if you're a surgeon at the largest pediatric hospital in the country, you're probably doing okay. And you probably have a lot to lose by even putting yourself out there and telling what's going on in the background and countering the narrative that your employer is publicizing. And so this guy, if you can imagine, took a lot of backlash, and really to kind of get to, the long of the short of it, or the short of the long of it, is that, he was ultimately dismissed with prejudice, meaning that they can't try him again, and that, you know, this was a resolution that was brought by the DOJ once the Trump administration got into place, and that being not even, longer than 2 weeks at this point. I think we're about into a week of the president on hour 6 signing over 100 different executive orders to undo some of the madness that's been put in place throughout the last administration. And so, in very short order, he got around to Ethan's case and was able to get the Department of Justice to drop the charges again with prejudice, meaning that he can't be tried again. And so, if you ask a couple questions about this, some of the media and public perception on this, how does the framing of this case impact the trust in the medical system among transgender individuals and the general public? And I think what you might say is, we got to be cautious. Okay, we got to be cautious and pray that there are other fearless leaders like Dr. Ethan Haim who are willing to put everything on the line, their livelihood, their careers, all of that, all that they've worked for. I mean, this guy's a doctor, for crying out loud. Everybody knows how long you go to school when you're a doctor. And so I don't know if this would have ever come to light. Who knows? They might still be giving double mastectomies to 12-year-old girls and, chopping off the most delicate regions of 9-year-old boys at this point. And Houston, Texas had Dr. Ethan Haim not spoke out on this. I don't know how we really can mitigate something like this from happening, especially when you have publications like, the Texas Tribune, who are trying to, lambast this guy and label him as some, anti-transgender activist. And it's just like, no, this isn't right. And we're not going to stand for this. And I'm not going to let you say that you're doing something that you're not. And when you're not supposed to be doing what you're doing, you're ultimately changing the lives of people and causing them probably more harm than good. And we know that there are several studies that have come out that once the gender dysphoria wears off, folks start to mature. They start to realize all of the changes that they put themselves through really don't bring them the happiness that they're looking for, starts to, create even more likelihood for suicide and all sorts of diabolical outcomes. So, again, kudos to Dr. Ethan Haim. We're proud that you went and, stood up for what you believed in and stood up for transparency in the medical space. And really can't say enough. Probably should cover this a little bit more. But another question here, how does this case reflect the balance between whistleblowing and patient confidentiality in the medical field? And I'll say that it really doesn't. Okay, ultimately, in this article, and I'll take you to, I think one of the questions that I had here too is, what are some potential biases in the way that the different media outlets have reported this case? And so I'll take you to, in the same breath, to answer both of those questions, Exhibit A in the Texas Tribune, in this paragraph where they write, I think I already read this, Haim, a self-described whistleblower, where it says that while transgender care for minors was legal in 2022, when the records were sourced, the hospital publicly had said it would end providing the care after Governor Greg Abbott ordered the parents of the children undergoing transition-related care be investigated for child abuse. The Texas Supreme Court later ruled Abbott had no grounds to order the Department and Family and Protective Services to investigate the families. Haim never contested that he leaked the records. However, he did maintain throughout the legal proceedings that no laws were broken because personally identifiable patient information was not disclosed. That's also what it affirms here in the article from the Free Press. I'm missing what I was really looking for here. Give me 1 second. I want to say it was written here in the article, they kind of tried to gloss over it. And they tried to say that he turned over these records when it reports here in the Free Press, and as it affirms here, actually in the Texas Tribune's write up on this, is that ultimately there were no violations of patient privacy. What Haim blew the whistle on were mostly surgeries to insert hormonal devices that prevent children from going through puberty. The records he revealed about these interventions, the records the records he revealed about these interventions carefully redacted identity information about the patients. What's more, he had caught the hospital in a bold-faced lie about the very existence of the program. Most dangerous for Haim was that he had run afoul on the Biden administration's unquestioning support of medical transition of young people distressed about their gender. So ultimately, he never had any names, addresses, and pertinent information that if you were wanting to, expose someone in terms of being able to get a HIPAA violation, none of that ever took place. And so there was really no harm there. And it's wild to think that the focus was on patient, security and, patient privacy, when really in reality, we know that that wasn't even a real issue. At the same time, what about this huge company, the biggest children's pediatric hospital in the country, is telling the public that they're doing one thing and in reality they're doing another? Maybe what we'll see moving forward is a full-on investigation of Texas Children's Hospital, and we'll continue to remember that we need heroes like Dr. Ethan Haim to speak up to protect us all from folks that are ultimately up to no good. All right. So again, kudos to Dr. Ethan Haim for fighting the good fight, and ultimately, might have to give all of us as United States citizens, the ones that got in the booth and decided that we needed a change in administration, kudos as well, because hey, had we not seen what we saw on, election day in 2024, Dr. Ethan Haim might still be in hot water. All right, so moving on, I want to talk to you all about a show that I've grown very fond of. I think if I were to give like a little bit, I didn't think to plan on this, but if I were to give like some feedback on Tulsa King, I would say it's a little far-fetched on some of the antics that you see with, Sylvester Stallone's character. I believe you call him, it's the Taylor Sheridan show. Sylvester Stallone's character. I don't fall in love with shows like this. Like, I know it's Manfredi, right? Yeah, Dwight Manfredi, right? He's the general, right? The general. So, yeah, so ultimately, Dwight's character, gets himself kind of into some hot water, but that's kind of like what you do as a gangster. You go out and you make stuff happen, and some of that stuff, you know, isn't legal. So, ultimately, it's kind of like a part of it all, but some of the things that he makes happen, you know, I don't think necessarily is viable, but I guess that's kind of some of it, is that what you do is you create the problem, suggest that I can protect you from the problem, and therefore you build value on the relationship and the business partnership. So nonetheless, I like the show a lot. It's really entertaining. And so I thought it was cool when I saw this article saying that, because they have to launch a third season. The way that, and no spoilers, but the way that season 2 ended, you have to come out with season 3, right? And so ultimately, I saw articles saying that he wants to bring on Al Pacino. Al Pacino is a fantastic actor. I loved him and a lot of different movies. Was that Dog Day? I can't remember what you call it there. And then, of course, Scarface. And, I think we've seen a lot of De Niro in Pacino, but, ultimately Sly doing this thing with Pacino would be amazing. So I really hope that they make that happen. I thought this was kind of a diabolical quote. It says, "You better do this before you croak." And, Al Pacino, let me look it up here. Let me see his love child that he had. Let me see if I can find Al Pacino's baby mama has a baby. I think this woman was probably young enough to have been babysitted by his daughter Julie, but I think that's awesome that we don't want that to be his last act, if you will. And so, yeah, 31-year-old Noor. I'm not gonna try to go any further on that, but ultimately, yeah, I think they're closer in age with Julie, but at the same time, yeah, fantastic actor. Would love to see him get back into another gangster role. Hopefully, my critique of his relationship didn't cause him to do anything gangster to me, but looking forward to that. Y'all tell me what you think in the comments on if you'd want to see Al Pacino come on the third season of Tulsa King or not. I'm saying make it happen, Al. Let's see it. We want to see you. We love you and Sylvester Stallone. The show's great, and I mean it'd be the perfect type of show for him to join. So, all right. So we have our final segment here that we want to talk about, which is the tragedy that's taken place in the Potomac. And I'm just going to speak from the heart. I don't really have any articles in front of me. I do have a Twitter or a tweet from X or a blurb from X there that Pete Buttigieg sent out, and so we'll talk a little bit about it. But real quick, so I want to do like the president did and just start this conversation off with a moment of silence. All right. So, this is a tragedy, right? And so ultimately, you got to be careful, okay? And in many different ways. And I think that right now, some of the criticism on the speech that President Donald Trump gave is a sidestep from being careful. And I disagree. And it's not because, I voted for the guy and that I love him and I think he's an amazing person that's done a lot of amazing things. All that aside, is that imagine this. So you're telling your child that because I have plenty of criticisms that I've given our president over the years, and I don't think he cares to know any of them, but from me anyway. But so imagine though that you have a child and you're telling them that they need to wear their helmet, and then they go on a bike ride, and they need to wear their. Let's just say, I want to leave because I want to I want to be as gentle as I can here. You tell them they need to wear their knee pads and their elbow pads and their helmet and their things like that. And they need to wear they're learning how to ride a bike. They need to be careful. They need to wear their pads, right? And so they go for a bike ride and they fall off their bike. And thankfully they had their helmet on, but they didn't have their knee pads and their elbow pads on. And they come back in the house, they're all skinned up, right? So are you at that moment just going to only lean into empathy, or are you going to remind them that we need to be safe and we need to practice the utmost safety in terms of these types of situations? You an example, this child an example, riding their bike, because if we don't, then you come in the house and you're all skinned up. Okay. And so let's just say that, for a month before the child got their bike, you were saying, all right, I'm going to get you this bike, but I'm going to need you to be safe about it. I'm going to need you to be practicing. Oh, no, Jimmy doesn't wear a helmet, or Jimmy doesn't know. No, I'm not raising Jimmy. I'm raising you, Joshua. I don't know. We're going to, I'm raising you, so, that you've said that you're going to get the bike, but you've also said that you're going to get the bike and you're going to wear pads and a helmet, right? And so ultimately, once the child has continued to campaign to get the bike, You've reinforced that there's going to be an agreement, that you're going to be practicing utmost safety. And then when they come in the house and they're all scarred up, well, you can't pull back and say, this is why we need to be practicing safety. Okay. So to me, that's what President Trump did today whenever he made sure to let folks know, hey, I've been campaigning on the idea that you can't just hire people because they look a certain way or they have a certain, thing about them that isn't the same as everybody else. So diversify the staff. We're gonna hire people just because they ain't like everybody. No, we're gonna get away from that. We're gonna have the best of the best, especially in the situations where it requires having people that have certain skill sets. That's what we're gonna focus on. And so he came out with it. He was like, "Yo, I campaign on ending DEI. I signed a executive order that put away DEI. I've gotten a lot of pushback about it. I've had people talking out the side of their neck. And now you see the consequences of, or he really, I think what people were saying is, or what he was saying was not now you see the consequences, because that's where I think the words have been getting minced up, is that he wasn't, saying this happened because of DEI, but he was saying that we're going to make sure we prevent things from like this from happening by not having the very best people in place. And I want to mention what that looks like. And he did, just from what I remember him talking about, was that there were certain, things about people that have like epileptic seizures. They were going to be allowed to have this job. People that didn't, or typically don't show the mental fortitude to do an air traffic controller job is what they opened that role back up for. And so who knows? I mean, he's the president. He might already have had somebody whisper in his ear, Mr. President, yeah, it's one of these, folks that, that have been showing some issues before. We already kind of know that, this person was underperforming. He might have already gotten some information. Who knows? Maybe he was, kind of giving us a heads up on what we might learn about this situation. Michael Berry said this morning that he's not rooting for this to be based on DEI, that someone who was, very well unqualified was in the seat, in any of these seats, whether it be the helicopter, the plane, or at the, and maybe that's kind of how he knew to start talking about the air traffic controller. Maybe because, he might have already gotten a lead that when these air traffic controllers was freaking out and, kind of lost ability to do what is required for them to be successful in their job. I don't know that. That's just based on, me understanding the messaging, which was essentially what I heard was, hey, we have jobs that are very, crucial in this country, and we have gone and gotten away from measures to make sure that we're getting the very best people to do these jobs. And that's based on the idea that we're going to diversify the workforce, when we've already seen lapses of folks being able to execute at a high level due to those changes in policies. We're going back, and if it comes out that this is an example of why we're going back, well, I already done said it. So that's kind of what it sounded like to me. It's like, hey, you've been riding your bike. Maybe been good for 2 weeks. You got comfortable now. Your child's done got comfortable now. And, you notice, hey, they not wearing their pads on their elbows and they coming back in the house. I don't need pads. I don't need, knee pads and elbow pads. I'm fine, whatever. And so, you let it slide and whatnot. And then next thing you know, they come in the house all scraped up. And it's like, see, I told you, So ultimately, it's not a I told you so, really, but at the same time, it is kind of a nod to, we are going to be making changes, and you can just stand by, because here they come. And so we have so we have Pete Buttigieg, the former transportation secretary, and he released a comment on X saying, "Despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had zero commercial airline crash fatalities out of the millions of flights on our watch. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again." Interesting thoughts there, Pete. Interesting thoughts. Let's talk about it. So, first and foremost, he says it's despicable that as families grieve, Trump should be leading and not lying. Well, you know, we've seen some incidents happen in this country, and it felt like pulling, tooth and nail to get the president to come out and say anything about it. I mean, most recently, even those fires in Los Angeles, you got the mayor of Los Angeles out on a junket in Ghana and can't hardly get in her to say anything until she, takes a couple days to finally make it back to the country. Anyways, we're not talking about, the mayors. We're talking about presidents here. And so, what were we talking about today? And what is he making a comment on? Is the fact that in very short order, our president got up and he spoke about it. And so now he says, so he's criticizing the fact that he is leading, right, by actually coming out and making a statement and getting in front of the changes that we're going to be making. And so he also says that he's lying. Well, my friend Pete, that's not true. You're actually lying. Okay. And this is a quick, I mean, I'm not dedicated to doing this all day, every day. Y'all already know. So, but I wanted to find out, were there any changes made in terms of what, protocols they have set in place at the FAA? And I did a quick search and I found an article from the FAA that says accounting for different flying experience. And so in late 2020, or excuse me, in late 2021, the FAA changed the Flight Standardization Board process to ensure it includes air carrier pilots of varying levels of experience for transport airline certification projects. The FAA uses these evaluations when clarifying large commercial aircraft to help determine training requirements. Section 128 of the Aircraft Certification, Safety, and Accountability Act required the change. All right, so one more time. In late 2021, the FAA changed the Flight Standardization Board process to ensure it includes air carrier pilots of varying levels of experience for transport airplane certification projects. The FAA uses these evaluations when certifying large commercial aircraft to help determine training requirements. Section 128 of the Aircraft Certification, Safety, and Accountability Act required the change. So there have been changes made at the FAA. I probably could find you a lot more. This was just one from late 2021. So what is Pete Buttigieg talking about whenever he says that the president is lying? You probably have to ask him. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had zero commercial airline crash fatalities out of millions of flights on our watch. Okay, that's perfectly fine. But guess what? Their watch ended literally like 5 minutes ago. Okay. The president has been in office, for about a week, right? And, changes have been made. Have people lost their jobs yet? Don't know, right? The person who, was in a seat in any of these instances that might have gotten that seat because of, changes in policies that were made in 2021, I don't know, right? And so really, I don't think he knows either. But to say that the president's lying, that there have never been any changes, that's a lie. That's a leading factoid that he's trying to throw out. I think it's probably disqualified by this very quick and easy searchable change in policies that it seems like the verbiage says that the policies include aircraft carrier pilots of varying levels of experience. And like, what is that varying level of experience? Why are you changing? Why is it not levels of the highest experience, right? So it would beg the question. So at the same time, let's go a little further. It says President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Now that I'm here, we're going to make changes. Now that I'm here, I don't want to hear, they got them going live right now. Now that I'm here, I don't want to hear the nonsense whenever it comes to, me making changes to ensure that this isn't going to happen again. And so, thanks, Pete, for chiming in. But ultimately, our president's been at it for, a little over a week now. And ultimately, you folks, whoever was in that position, probably are responsible for. And so this is exactly why these changes are going to be made. This is exactly why minute one of this public notice this morning was related to how he's going to make these changes. Anyways, I'm coming in defense with the strong messaging that was provided by President Trump today. I think that, yes, we want to grieve. Yes, we want to, express solemn feelings without a doubt. But also, we want to express that we will be looking at this very closely. We will, if the need be, express change of policies and also reference the necessity for the erosion of these DEI policies and these woke policies that might have put somebody in position in a job that they typically would not be qualified for because they're not the very best. They have character traits that might make them unsuitable. Again, there were certain policies that he was able to read off during that press conference, things like having epilepsy and other mental type, conditions that would prevent you from being as successful as you could possibly be in this role. Those policies were overwritten in the previous administration, and we're going to put those policies back in place. Let the outcome of this investigation show that folks that were in seats that might have been in a seat when other policies were in place, that might not have been in seats when other policies were in place. Ultimately, this is just a precursor to say, we're going to find out who was doing what. And I'm just letting you know that if the who shouldn't have been doing the what, we're going to fix it. So I don't have a problem with them telling us, like it is whenever, it's fresh off of, the incident, because, the whole truth of the matter is that if there's any other instances like this that are happening, and we know that they are, we know that, people have turned a blind eye to let millions of people in our country, and they've, these millions of people, some of them have gone to just, simply, clean toilets and, fold clothes and do very nice things for very nice people. And a lot of them have gone on to bash in the skull of college students that were just going off for a run and totally upheaving the lives. We just heard a story this morning on Michael Berry show about a guy who, I think this guy was illegal as well. And, again, don't want to mince, conversations when it comes to immigrants. Nothing wrong with immigrants, nothing wrong with people that want to come to the United States, nothing wrong with people that are taking the proper measures to become United States citizens that were not born here. What's wrong is if you're trying to do it illegally. And so I can't stand, like, when I see on Instagram posts of, immigrants are great. Yeah, they are great. They are great. The illegal ones aren't, though. The ones that have broken the law to be here are not great, especially the ones that have come from countries when they were in jail or they were in, on the run from being held accountable for rape and murder and larceny, and now are here doing those exact same things to American citizens. We have enough rapists, larcenists, thieves, you name it, here that were born in America. We don't need to import anymore. So anyways, we also have enough opportunity in this country to be the best, to be the very best, and to continue to put your best foot forward and earn into a role for a meritocracy, in a meritocracy, in a space where we look at only bringing in those that are built to execute and have proven that they can do so, and letting the chips fall where they lay, not reconfiguring the rules to open it up to folks who might not be the best suited for the task at hand. We're going to look at that very closely in this administration. I'm thrilled to see it. All right, so thanks for joining me. Appreciate y'all on TikTok for being here live and seeing all of the blunders and the redos, and also, of course, thanks for joining me here on YouTube. You can find me on TikTok at I'm Dapper Don. Be sure to like and subscribe if any of this content has been compelling for you, and I'll certainly look forward to seeing you on the next installment of the Donavan Starghill Show. Thanks, take care.